Part 1. Into the Quiet, where the dark begins. The lake was draining, not all at once, not in a dramatic collapse of rushing water or exposed rock beds. No, it was vanishing quietly, day by day, as if something beneath Cragmore Lake was drinking it from below. Emma noticed it the second morning she woke up in the cabin. The waterline had receded just enough for her to see the pale mud ring circling the shoreline like a noose. She hadn't paid attention on her first day. After all, this trip was supposed to be about disconnecting, not watching the environment unravel. She stood on the rickety wooden deck, coffee in hand, and stared at the lake. The surface was still, too still. No birds, no insects, no wind, just silence so thick it made her ears feel full. The air tasted metallic. The house was a rental, a friend of a friend's cousin or something, nestled on a forgotten spit of land a few miles outside Elkmont, Tennessee. The area used to be popular with vacationers in the 1940s, but now it was nothing but a scattering of aging cabins, barely clinging to the edge of the Great Smoky Mountains. Emma, 34, had just finalized her divorce 2 months earlier. She needed solitude, time to think, to write, to breathe. A place without emails or awkward dinner invites or the pitying glances of friends who didn't understand that sometimes love just ends. She brought her laptop, a few books, and enough food to last 10 days. She had no plans to go into town. She was here to be alone, and she was, painfully so. By the third morning, the lake was down another 4 inches. A dead carp lay belly up on the cracked silt, flies already gathering. Emma crouched beside it, studied the glassy eye. Something had torn through the flesh near the gills, not scavenged, ripped, as if something had grabbed it from underneath and pulled. She stood, dusted off her hands, and froze. Footprints, not hers. They weren't fresh, but they hadn't been there yesterday. They curved around the edge of the lake, trailing through the mud and disappearing into a dense wall of pine trees that bordered the northern edge of the property. They were barefoot, human, wide. But what sent a cold current down her spine was the direction. The prints led toward the cabin, and none came back out. She didn't sleep that night. She locked all the windows, moved a dresser in front of the back door, sat with her back against the wall and a kitchen knife in her lap. The silence of the cabin, so deep it became oppressive. Not even the hum of a refrigerator, just the windless void, pressing on her temples, stretching every minute into hours. That was the night she heard the whispering. It wasn't inside the cabin. It wasn't outside either. It was somewhere in between, threading through the cracks in the foundation, slithering through the vents and between the floorboards. Her name. It was saying her name. She wanted to believe it was the wind. But the air hadn't moved in days. If you're still with me, you haven't even heard the worst of it yet. These are not myths, not stories passed down over campfires and embellished over time. These are true accounts gathered from the deepest, loneliest corners of the Appalachian Mountains. Real people, real encounters, real disappearances. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. It's the best way to support what we do and keep the series going. Your support helps us bring more of these hidden stories to light, ones they'd rather you never hear. Now, let's keep going. The hollow behind Cragmore Lake, Emma didn't leave after the whispering. She told herself it was stress, isolation, a reaction to solitude and the trauma of separation. Her therapist had warned her that the quiet might feel overwhelming at first, that she might hallucinate, so she stayed. On day 5, the lake had receded so far that a small depression in the bank became visible, not quite a cave, more like a hollow in the red clay, lined with stone, too symmetrical to be natural. She found it while walking the shoreline, trying to distract herself. The hollow was maybe 6 feet high and 8 feet deep. There was no smell of dampness, no animal sign, no moss or vines, just dry, red dirt and a few flat rocks in a circle like someone had built a makeshift fire pit decades ago. She crouched down, crawled halfway in, and sat. That's when she felt it, a vibration, so low and deep it was almost imperceptible, like standing on the deck of a ship, far from shore, not threatening, just present. She left quickly. That night, she dreamed of water rising up the walls of her cabin, submerging her bed. A face floated just beneath the surface, pale, expressionless, watching her sleep. When she woke, the windows were open. All of them. She was certain she'd locked them. The next day, she returned to the hollow, not because she wanted to, but because she felt compelled, the way you're drawn to a deep cut on your finger, even when it hurts. There was something about the stillness inside. It wasn't peaceful. It was alert, like the air was listening. She brought her phone and took a picture of the hollow's interior. But when she looked at the screen, her hands went cold. The photo showed a tunnel, dark, sloping, and long, at least 20 feet deep, far deeper than she could see with her own eyes. She blinked, confused, then aimed the camera again and took another. The same result. Tunnel. But standing inside it now, she saw only red clay and rock. She backed away and returned to the cabin. That night, she connected her phone to the laptop and opened the photos in full resolution. In the center of the frame, just barely visible, was a figure, human, sitting cross-legged in the shadows, hands on knees. Its face was wrong. The features were there, but they were soft, like molded wax, eyeless, genderless. Its head tilted slightly as if listening. Emma turned off the laptop. She didn't sleep. The next morning, she drove to the nearest gas station with a signal and tried to call the friend who'd given her the cabin. The number was disconnected. She searched the web for Cragmore Lake disappearance and found nothing. But when she searched for Cragmore Lake ritual site, a cached version of a page appeared for half a second before disappearing behind a 404 error. Her browser crashed. The laptop restarted on its own. She turned around to leave the gas station and nearly slammed into the glass door, because standing on the other side of it was the figure from the photo. Only now it had eyes, and it was smiling. She screamed, stumbled backward, and when she looked again, it was gone. The attendant behind the counter didn't even flinch. "You okay, hun?" he asked, glancing up from a dog-eared magazine. "You look pale." Emma didn't answer. She drove back to the cabin against every instinct screaming at her to keep going. Her things were there. Her laptop, her journal. Her car was already running hot from the climb back up. When she arrived, the cabin door was open. Inside, every item she had packed had been neatly arranged on the floor, clothes folded, toothbrush lined up next to her journal, shoes placed toe to heel in a row. Her laptop screen was on. A new document was open. It said, "We heard you." Nothing else. She turned, walked out, and drove away. But the story doesn't end there. 3 months later, she was found in a motel room in Asheville, alive, mostly coherent. She had been writing on the walls, hundreds of pages, repeating one sentence over and over again. "It comes from underneath." She didn't remember checking into the room. She didn't remember leaving the cabin. She claimed to have followed someone through the tunnel. A girl, blonde, no eyes. Emma hasn't spoken since. Not a word. Just stares. The lights in Pinewood Ridge. Travis McLean had never believed in ghosts. He'd worked the Pinewood Ridge station for nearly 10 years. Never seen anything more than the occasional drunk camper or black bear with a grudge against coolers. 45, ex-military, no nonsense. He didn't scare easy. So when the lights started, he assumed it was a prank. At first, they flickered along the ridgeline. Faint blue flashes, like lightning, but silent. They appeared only after midnight. Always the same place, just east of the fire lookout tower. The first time he hiked out to investigate, took his rifle just in case. There was nothing. The second night, same lights. This time they moved. Down the slope. Faster than he could track. By the time he reached the tree line, they were gone. But something else wasn't. A voice. Faint, like wind in tall grass, but unmistakable. "Where were you, Travis?" He froze. Not because he didn't know the voice, but because he did. It was his daughters, who had died in a car crash 6 years earlier. Part 2. Whispers Beneath the Trees. The Knock at Widow's Cabin. Gavin Reese never planned to stay the night. The original plan was simple. 2 days in the Highland Woods near Elkmont, Tennessee, photograph wildlife during golden hour, pitch a tent, head back down Sunday before the weekend crowds returned. But after a thunderstorm rolled through unexpectedly and washed out the access road, he found himself in need of shelter. That's when he remembered the ranger talking about Widow's cabin. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, just an old, unmapped service cabin used by fire crews decades ago. Gavin had even laughed at the nickname. "Why do they call it that?" he'd asked the ranger. The man had shrugged. "Used to belong to a widow who refused to leave when they shut the valley down for conservation. Some say she never did." Now ankle-deep in mud, Gavin didn't find the story so funny. The cabin appeared just as dusk began bleeding into the trees. It was squat, stone and timber, leaning slightly to the left like it had been pushing back against the wind for decades and had finally given up. The wooden porch was soaked through, moss crawling up the posts like veins. Still, it was dry. That was enough. He pushed the creaky door open, expecting dust and cobwebs, but the inside was surprisingly clean. No furniture except a rusted stove and a broken rocking chair in the corner. Someone had clearly passed through recently. There were 2 half-melted candles on the mantelpiece, wax hardened into soft pools. A pile of split firewood beside the hearth, a folded wool blanket near the stove. Gavin checked for signs of rodents or larger animals. Nothing. He set his camera bag down and decided to stay the night. It was better than risking a broken ankle in the dark. The first knock came just after midnight, which he had just begun drifting off when a sharp, deliberate knock echoed from the door. Not loud, not panicked, just measured. 3 slow beats. He froze. A second later, another knock. Identical. He waited. Nothing. No wind, no voices. Just the silence and the tick of his wristwatch. He got up slowly, gripped his flashlight, and crept toward the door. The beam flickered across the windows. Nothing but trees and moonlight. He opened the door a crack and shone the light outside. Nothing. No tracks, no movement, no sound. He locked the door, slid the heavy latch across, and returned to his sleeping bag. The second knock came at 3:17 a.m. Same rhythm. 3 slow knocks, this time heavier. He sat up instantly. His flashlight was already beside him. He clicked it on and held his breath. There were footsteps now, slow, on the porch, then silence again. He moved to the peephole and looked through. No one, but something strange caught his eye. The candles. Both were lit. He hadn't touched them. He hadn't brought matches. Gavin stayed awake until dawn, knife in hand, every muscle tight with dread. By morning, the candles were melted down completely, stubs of wax on scorched stone. When he opened the front door, his stomach dropped. The porch was covered in muddy handprints. Dozens of them pressed into the boards, some small like a child's, some enormous. Each one with the fingers spread wide, splayed out like they had been pressed in panic or in prayer. He packed and left immediately, not bothering to eat. When he reached the ranger station, he asked if anyone had keys to the old service cabin. The ranger paused. "What cabin?" "Widow's cabin, just up near Pine Hollow. Stone structure, half-rotted deck. Still got wood stacked near the stove." The man stared at him. "There's no cabin up there," he said. "That one burned down in 1993. Lightning strike. Took the whole place. Killed the guy inside." Gavin didn't reply. He just walked to his car and didn't stop driving until he was across the state line. 3 steps behind me. It was supposed to be a solo retreat. Alyssa Breen, 27, had spent years hiking with her father across the trails of Shenandoah and the Blue Ridge Parkway. She knew how to read a map, how to pace herself, how to listen for birds and keep an eye on the sun. She was strong, smart, and cautious. That's why she didn't tell anyone she was scared. It started 3 miles in. She was hiking the Appalachian Trail segment that passed through Harper's Ferry, a quiet stretch of forest with wide paths and gentle elevation. The kind of trail you could almost do blindfolded. She had passed the trailhead, checked her gear, and begun her ascent without issue. Then she heard the first footstep. Not hers. It came after hers. She stopped. The forest stopped with her. A moment passed, then 3 more soft steps. Behind her, she spun. Nothing. She scanned the path behind her. No one. She took another step forward, then another. Crunch. Crunch. 3 more crunches, delayed by half a second, exactly matching hers. She stopped again. They stopped. She tried laughing it off. Maybe it was an echo. A natural sound bouncing off the trees. But something was wrong. There was no wind, no birds, just her steps and the others. She sped up. The steps followed. She jogged. They jogged. Always 3 steps behind. Never closer. Never farther. By the time she reached the ridge's overlook, she was sweating. Not from exertion, but from fear. She turned quickly and snapped a photo with her phone, hoping to catch whoever was following her. But when she looked at the screen, her stomach flipped. The photo showed a person, her size, her build, wearing her exact clothes, same blue windbreaker, same khaki trail pants. But the face was wrong. Mouth too wide, skin too smooth. The eyes were white, no pupils. She dropped the phone. It clattered against the rocks and tumbled down the ridge. When she looked up, the figure was gone. Alyssa ran the rest of the trail without stopping. When she reached her car, she fumbled with the keys, started the ignition, and peeled out, dirt kicking up behind her tires. Only once she'd hit the main road did she dare look in the rearview mirror. Nothing, just trees. Still, that night, in her apartment in Richmond, she woke to find muddy footprints leading from her front door to her bedroom, and on her kitchen counter was her phone. The same one she'd lost on the trail. The photo was still there, and now the figure was smiling. The connection deepens. 2 weeks later, Gavin Reese received a strange package at his home in Asheville. No return address, no postage, just a small cardboard box wrapped in twine. Inside, a USB stick. When he plugged it into his laptop, it autoplayed a video. A young woman, clearly terrified, was filming herself inside a parked car. Trees behind her, breath fogging the lens. Her voice shook. "I think it's following me again. I saw it on the trail near Harper's Ferry. It looked like me. It moved when I moved. I didn't post this. I didn't send this to anyone. If you found this, please don't go into the woods alone. And if you see something with your face, run." Then the screen cut to black. Underneath the video file, one more file. Widows, cabin map JPG. Gavin clicked it. It was a satellite image. The cabin, the hollow behind Cragmore Lake, Pinewood Ridge, and dozens of red X marks scattered across the Appalachian Trail. He zoomed in. Each X had a label, names, dates, some familiar, some not. One was labeled Gavin Reese, 1013. Another, Alyssa Breen, 1015. And below that, Marissa Thatcher, 1102. He recognized the last name. Marissa had been his ex-girlfriend, a military analyst, tough as nails. She'd disappeared last year while hiking in the Roan Highlands. No body was ever found, just her pack, torn, with a folded piece of paper inside. "We heard you." This was no longer a coincidence. Something was watching them, marking them, following. And now Gavin had the map. He printed it, highlighted the overlap points. He had to know. He had to find the pattern. Because this wasn't just backwoods paranoia anymore. This was something deliberate. Part 3. The forest remembers the chimney on Devil's Backbone. The chimney wasn't supposed to be there. Mason Shaw had been hiking the Devil's Backbone Ridge for 3 years, mostly out of habit. After retiring early from his job as a history teacher in Asheville, he'd begun mapping out old Civil War supply routes that once weaved through the mountains. It was his way of keeping himself busy after Susan died, and it helped ease the silence in his chest. But he'd never seen this chimney before. It was tall, maybe 8 feet high, standing alone in a clearing halfway up the ridge. No foundation, no stone walls, just a dark, soot-streaked stack of rock with vines wrapped around the top like a crown. Moss pushed between the bricks, but the structure was solid, intact. Mason removed his pack, crouched beside it, and ran his hand along the lower stones. They were cold, damp, worn. He took a photo, made a note in his leather-bound trail journal, and moved on. That night back in his cabin, he flipped through the pictures. The chimney looked different. He zoomed in. There, in the bottom left corner, barely visible in the shadow, a handprint, smudged in soot, long fingers, distorted, like it had been smeared while still wet. He blinked and looked again. The photo was clear, but when he returned to the image 2 hours later, the handprint was gone. The next day, he went back. The chimney was still there, of course, but something had changed. At the base, someone had left a book, a small, leather-bound volume, soaked from morning dew. Mason opened it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was his own. Same slanted letters, same lowercase g that always leaned to the left, same shorthand notes about terrain, landmarks, bird calls. But the dates were wrong. They were all from the 1920s. At first he thought it had to be a mistake, a joke, someone copying his journal style. But as he read through the entries, his hands started to shake, because they referenced places he hadn't told anyone about. Off-trail ruins, hidden campsites, broken supply caches from the Civil War. Things he'd only written in his personal log, never published, never emailed. He flipped to the last page. There, scrawled in his handwriting, was a single phrase: "The fire never went out." That night, Mason dreamed of smoke. He was walking through the woods with a group of men in Union uniforms. None of them had faces. The trees around them were blackened, scorched. The ground hissed beneath their boots. They reached a cabin, or what was left of one. Only the chimney stood. The rest was ash. One of the faceless men turned to him. "You lit it," the man said, voice low and gravelly. "You made the promise. Now keep it." Mason woke up gasping. His clothes smelled like burnt wood, and on his pillow sat a single pine cone, blackened, still warm. When the rocks start whispering. Sophia Liang wasn't afraid of being alone in the woods. She'd led trauma therapy retreats across the Southeast for over a decade. Quiet hikes, mindfulness walks, journaling by firelight. After years of hearing other people's pain, she'd developed a resilience that most people mistook for serenity. But what happened to her near Black Mountain had nothing to do with trauma. It had to do with something older. It began with the rocks. She had booked a 3-day solo getaway in a rental cabin built into a boulder field on the north face of the ridge. The area was famous for its massive, moss-covered stones, stacked like ruins from some ancient civilization. Some people claimed they hummed at night. On her first morning, Sophia sat cross-legged between two large boulders, breathing, meditating, letting her mind settle. That's when she heard it, a whisper, not wind, not breath, words. At first she thought she was slipping into a memory, but the voice wasn't hers. It was Amy's. Amy was one of Sophia's former clients, an abuse survivor who disappeared 6 months after their last session. "Amy," Sophia whispered, opening her eyes. Nothing, just trees and stone. But the rock to her right felt warm. Over the next 2 days, it escalated. Every time she entered the boulder field, she heard more whispers, different voices, some she recognized, former clients, old friends, even her mother. Others were strangers, men, women, children, all speaking in fragments. "You left me in the dark. He never said goodbye. She drowned. I'm still here." On the second night, Sophia recorded one of the sessions on her phone. When she played it back, she nearly dropped the device. The voices were clear, and one of them was her own. It was saying, "I'm sorry I let them die." She had no memory of saying it, no context, no explanation. She confronted the stones the next morning, sat in the middle of the field, eyes open, journal in hand. "I don't believe in ghosts," she said aloud, "but I believe in pain. I believe it leaves scars." The wind picked up, leaves twisted. The whispering began again. But this time the rocks didn't speak in others' voices. They spoke in unison, a single phrase, repeated in a dozen tones. "You brought them here." Sophia stood trembling, because she finally understood. She wasn't hearing echoes. She was hearing imprints, the residue of every person she'd ever listened to, every wound she'd helped uncover, every buried truth she'd unearthed in the name of healing. Their pain hadn't left. She had absorbed it, carried it, and now the land, this ancient, scarred land, was speaking it back to her. She left the cabin that afternoon, didn't pack, didn't turn off the lights, just walked away. 2 weeks later, her therapy practice was closed. No announcement, no farewell post. Just gone. But before she vanished, she mailed a package to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy office. Inside was her journal, and a note: "The forest remembers everything we say, but it never forgets what we feel." Patterns in the map. The red X's on Gavin's printout began to form a shape. He didn't see it at first. Too many scattered data points. Too many names he didn't recognize. But something about the cluster around Devil's Backbone in Black Mountain drew his eye. He connected them with a marker. They formed a spiral, a slow inward spiral that pointed directly at Cragmore Lake. He opened the USB again, searching for coordinates. The satellite image flickered once, then expanded. More X's, one labeled Sophia Liang, 1029, Black Mountain, another, Mason Shaw, 1031, Devil's Backbone, and beneath them a message: "We are not trespassing, we are returning." That night, Gavin dreamed of the cabin again. Not Widow's cabin, the first one, Cragmore. He saw Emma standing at the edge of the lake. Her face was calm, her hair floating behind her, as if suspended underwater. She held out her hand. "There's still one more trail," she whispered. Gavin woke with blood on his pillow, a small trickle from his left ear. And on his nightstand, though he never put it there, was Mason's field journal, the final page circled in red ink. The fire never went out. Part 4. Things that follow. The one who watches the trail read Marshall knew the woods better than most. As a wilderness instructor and ultramarathon trail runner, he'd logged thousands of miles across the Appalachian Highlands. The Roan Highlands near Carver's Gap were his favorite. The ridgelines, the balds, the open sky, they gave him space to think, space to breathe. He didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in curses. He believed in miles, elevation gain, terrain awareness, measurable things, predictable things, until he met it. It began on a cool October morning. Mist pooled in the hollows. The kind of day Reed called perfect for pushing. He was running a solo loop near Grassy Ridge Bald, prepping for a winter ultra, 30 miles. Light gear, water filter, no distractions. At mile 6, he saw the figure. It stood across the meadow, too far to identify, but unmistakably human-shaped. Stock still, not a ranger, not a hiker, just standing, watching. Reed waved, no response. He kept moving. Mile 10, the figure again, this time closer. No pack, no hat, arms at its sides, unmoving. It was impossible. He hadn't heard footsteps. No one could move that fast and stay that quiet, not over switchbacks and loose shale. Reed quickened his pace. At mile 14, he found the stone cairn. He'd seen it before, just a stack of flat rocks used to mark alternate trail loops. But this time, something had been added. A photograph, pinned beneath the top stone. It was Reed, taken mid-stride, arms pumping, mouth open in breath. From that day, someone had been close enough to photograph him, and he hadn't noticed. He looked up. The figure was 30 yards away. No face, or maybe a face, but blurred like a long exposure photo. The skin swirled in a soft distortion. Reed turned and ran. Hard. But he didn't stop until he reached the trailhead. He got into his truck, hands shaking, and slammed the lock button twice. His pulse thundered in his ears. For the first time in years, he felt genuine, primal fear. He looked in the side mirror. The figure stood at the edge of the trees, just watching. It didn't follow him home that night. But the next morning, it was across the street, then outside the gym, then at the gas station, always standing, still, staring. He tried to talk to it once, stepped toward it in the Walmart parking lot. But it vanished mid-blink, gone, like a signal cut off. He set up cameras around his house. Nothing. Motion sensors, infrared, heat tracking, no evidence. but every time he turned his back, he felt it. Reed stopped running, stopped going outside, and still it got closer. Until one night it stood inside the hallway of his house. No sound, no door open, just there. When he lunged, it vanished again. But that night, for the first time, he dreamed of the cabin, Cragmore Lake, the hollow in the trees, Emma standing at the edge, staring into the water. "Stop running," she said. "You're already off the trail." What I brought home. Vanessa Ellison was exhausted. She just finished a 60-hour shift rotation at the ER in Asheville. 3 car crashes, a forest fire evac, one psych patient who claimed someone was living inside her skin. Just another weekend in the mountains. All she wanted was rest. She drove out to Clingman's Dome, one of her usual solo hikes, just a few hours in the woods. Silence, detachment. She didn't bring a friend, didn't tell anyone. She always preferred it that way. But this time, something followed her back. It started with the handprints on her apartment windows. On the outside of her second-story balcony, black, thin, spindly fingers, palm smears on the glass like someone, or something, was pushing to get in. She assumed it was kids. Then came the blackouts. Vanessa would wake up hours later in different clothes, dirt under her fingernails, scratches on her ankles. And most disturbing, muddy boot prints tracked through her apartment that didn't match her own. She set up her phone to record while she slept. The next morning, she watched the footage. At 3:21 a.m., she sat upright in bed. Then she stood, walked to her closet, and pulled out her hiking boots. She put them on, grabbed her notebook from the kitchen, and began writing. But she wasn't writing her usual shorthand or daily notes. She was drawing symbols, circles, spirals, eyes, trees. In the corner of the page, the hollow knows the body. When she played the audio back, she heard herself whispering, "I brought it back, I brought it back, I brought it back." That afternoon, she went to the hospital. She asked to speak to the psychiatric lead. But before she could explain, she collapsed in the hallway. They ran tests, no head injury, no drug exposure, no stroke, clean. But when they checked her belongings, they found her notebook. Pages and pages of the same drawing, repeated over and over, a spiral leading into a hollow. Black ink dug deep into the paper, as if she'd pressed until the pen nearly tore through. The attending physician called the police. They contacted the Appalachian Trail Conservancy because the symbol, according to an internal document, matched dozens found carved into trees and cabins across the Appalachian Range, always near places where people had gone missing. Vanessa vanished 3 days later. Security footage showed her walking out of the hospital barefoot at 4:16 a.m. She was last seen near Roan Highlands. Witnesses said she was whispering something about a lake and a hollow. Police found her boots at the trailhead. No footprints, just a photo in one of the boots. A group shot, Vanessa, Reed, Mason, Sophia, Emma, all standing together at the edge of Cragmore Lake. Only 4 of them had ever met. Convergence. By now, Gavin Reese was certain. They were being chosen, or maybe collected. The USB had more files now. He hadn't added them, hadn't connected it to the internet. But every morning there was something new. Photos, audio files, GPS logs. One morning he found a video of himself, sleeping in his bed. Another morning, a text file appeared with a list of names. More red X's, more trails, some marked as entered, others marked as taken, but only one marked as ready. Cragmore Lake. The spiral had closed. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing. It was no longer about the cabin. It was about what lived beneath it, and it wanted them all back. Part 5. No way back, the trail with no end. Jonah Keller hiked into the woods on a Tuesday. No one knew that Tuesday would last 10 days for him. It was supposed to be a simple volunteer sweep, checking part of the Appalachian Trail south of the Great Smoky Mountains for damage after a windstorm. He'd done dozens of these. He brought his usual pack: water, journal, radio, pocket compass. He marked his route on the forestry map. The plan was to loop past Cragmore Lake, log the hollow near the ridge, then return by dusk. But dusk never came. Not properly. The sun dimmed, yes, but never set, not fully. It hovered in an eternal golden hour, as if caught in the moment before twilight, stretching the sky thin and colorless. By day 3, he stopped checking his watch. The batteries had died, or maybe time had. At first, the trail behaved as expected. It curved with the slope, looped around fallen trees, traced the lake's edge. Then the path began to repeat. The same rock formations, the same rotting log, the same yellowing patch of moss, like a faded flag on the ground. He marked the trees with charcoal. The marks were already there. Jonah turned off the trail, bushwhacked north, using the lake as a landmark. But Cragmore Lake didn't shrink. No matter how long or far he hiked, he remained beside it, like it was moving with him. Even the sounds of nature began to shift. Birdsong slowed. The wind stuttered, like a recording looped improperly. Once he heard a scream inside the sound of a running stream, like water was mimicking a memory of pain. He tried his radio. Static. Then a voice. Oik, behind you. He turned, but there was no one. Just the cabin. The same one Emma had written about. Old, slanted, empty. But it hadn't been there 5 seconds earlier. Inside, the cabin was filled with mirrors. Not hanging mirrors, just reflective surfaces. Glass, water, polished metal, all of them warped. In each one, Jonah saw himself standing still, even when he moved. In one, he saw himself smiling. In another, crying. In one mirror, he was missing his eyes. He left the cabin and ran. That night, he dreamed of a group standing at the edge of the lake. Reed, Vanessa, Mason, Sophia, Gavin, even Emma. All silent, all facing the water. None of them turned when he called their names. Where the cabin at Laurel Point, Marissa Thatcher received the USB from an anonymous sender. No return address. She'd been in D.C. for nearly a year trying to forget. Reed, the forest, the trail markers, the duplicate footprints she'd once found next to hers. She thought it was over, until she plugged the USB in and saw herself, on video, 3 days before, entering a cabin she didn't recognize, wearing clothes she didn't own, sitting in a chair and whispering to someone off camera. "You promised," she said on the video. "You said the spiral wouldn't take me." Then she looked directly into the lens. "Come back, Marissa. You never left." The metadata on the file pointed to Laurel Point, Virginia, an old fire tower site, not on any public map. She packed a Glock, a trail GPS, her army boots. She hadn't worn the uniform in years, but the old instincts were still there. Hike in, confirm location, extract if necessary. When she reached the tree line, the compass began spinning. Her GPS screen went white. She walked anyway. The cabin appeared after 9 hours, nestled between twin birch trees. The front door was open. Inside, a table, a mirror, a chair. On the mirror, a note. "Sit. Remember." She didn't. Instead, she raised her weapon and searched the room. Empty, until she opened the floorboards. Below the house, in the crawl space, was a pile of clothes. Boots, shirts, journals, all labeled with names she recognized. Vanessa, Reed, Emma, Sophia, Jonah, Gavin, and hers. The mirror showed the spiral, not a drawing, but a living thing, pulsing with dark veins, like something beneath skin. It shifted, contracted, twisted inward, and inside it, figures, still, silent, waiting. Marissa ran, made it to the ridgeline, but the trees had changed. Each one bore a carving. "You never left, you never left, you never left." The spiral collapses. Gavin Reese stood at Cragmore Lake. The map had led him here. Every red X had spiraled to this place. The lake was lower now, dried to a cracked basin of clay and bones. The cabin behind him leaned farther than ever, like it was about to collapse inward. Reed arrived first. He said nothing, just dropped his pack and stared at the hollow near the lake's edge. Mason came next. He looked older, tired. Then Sophia, pale, withdrawn. Vanessa never made it, but her voice was on the wind. And Emma, they found her notebook nailed to the cabin door. Inside, the last page read, "We're already inside." That night, the cabin lit from within. No one struck a match, but fire crawled up the chimney, smoke rose, and the whispers returned. Each one a different name, each one a story, of fear, of witnessing, of promises broken. Jonah stepped into the hollow first. He vanished before reaching the end. Reed followed, then Mason, then Sophia, each swallowed by silence. Gavin hesitated, but the ground beneath him cracked, and the voice of Emma whispered one last thing: "The forest remembers, and it always brings us home." 1 week later, a ranger found the cabin empty. No signs of life. But inside, carved into the floorboards, a perfect spiral, still warm, still shifting, as if waiting for the next to arrive.